He packed his bags, called me too much to handle, and drove straight into the arms of a woman who looked nothing like me. I cried, I broke, I rebuilt. And the night he threw his engagement party, I walked in and the whole room forgot she existed. If you've ever been left for someone better, stay with me, because this story doesn't end where it started. Hit that like button right now, because by the end of this video, you're going to want to send it to every woman you know. And if you're going through something that feels like the end right now, I need you to keep watching, because I promise you it wasn't the end, not even close. I want you to picture the woman I was 3 years ago. Good job, nice apartment. A husband who used to look at me like I was everything. I had a life that looked beautiful from the outside, and honestly, most days it felt beautiful on the inside too. I wasn't naive. I wasn't blind. I was just in love. And when you're in love, you start to believe that love is enough to hold everything together. His name was Cole, and we had been together for 8 years, married for 6 of them. We built everything from scratch, I mean that literally. When we first moved in together, we had a second-hand couch, mismatched plates, and more ambition than money. We worked, we sacrificed, we showed up for each other on the days when showing up was hard. And slowly, year by year, we built something that felt real and solid and ours. We traveled together. We had inside jokes that still made me laugh years later. We had a rhythms who cooked on Tuesdays, who picked up the dry cleaning, who reached for the other one's hand first in a movie theater. It was ordinary in the most beautiful way, and I loved every ordinary piece of it. But somewhere around year 5 of our marriage, something shifted. It was quiet at first, the kind of shift you feel before you can name it. Cole started coming home later. He stopped reaching for my hand. Conversations that used to go for hours started ending in one-word answers. I noticed, of course I noticed, but I told myself what so many women tell themselves, that it was stress, that it was work, that it was just a season and seasons always change. I kept thinking it was me, that I was the problem. That I had gotten too comfortable, too settled, too familiar, so I tried harder. I planned date nights. I bought new things. I asked him what he needed, what I could do better, how I could show up for him differently. And every time, he would soften just enough to make me think we were going to be okay, just enough to keep me holding on. I didn't know I was holding on alone. It was a Tuesday. I remember that because I had made dinner, a real dinner, not takeout, and I was actually feeling good that evening. Light even, Cole came home, and the moment he walked through the door, I knew. I don't know how to explain it except to say that a woman always knows. The energy was different. He wasn't tired. He wasn't distracted. He was decided. He sat down across from me at the kitchen table and he said, and I will never forget these words for as long as I live, he said, "I need more. You're too comfortable, too settled. I feel like we've both just stopped growing." I sat there and I didn't say anything for what felt like a very long time, and then he told me about Simone. She was 24 years old, a model. He had met her at a brand event he attended for work about 4 months before that Tuesday night. 4 months? He had been carrying this for 4 months while I was planning date nights and trying to figure out what I was doing wrong. The worst part, and I need you to really hear this, the worst part wasn't that he was leaving. It was that he wasn't even sorry in the way a person is sorry when they've done something wrong. He was sorry the way someone is sorry when they have to deliver bad news. Clinical, detached. Like he had already grieved us and moved on before I even knew we were dying. He moved out within 2 weeks. I remember standing in the bedroom after the last box left and just looking at his side of the closet. Empty hangers. A single forgotten sock on the floor, and I thought 6 years of building something together, and it ends with an empty closet and a forgotten sock. I am not going to sugarcoat what came next. I fell apart, completely and totally fell apart. I cried in the shower so I didn't have to hear myself. I called in sick to work for 3 days in a row and just laid in bed staring at the ceiling. I stopped eating real food. I lost 12 pounds in 6 weeks, and not in any good way. My best friend Pearl would call me every single day, and most times I would let it go to voicemail because I didn't have the words. I didn't have anything. I had given that man the best years of my life, and he left me for a 24-year-old model because I was too settled. Here's something nobody tells you about heartbreak at this level. It's not just the person you lose. It's all the voices that rush in to fill the silence they left behind. And some of those voices come from people who love you, and somehow that makes it worse. My aunt told me in the most gentle voice she could manage, "Maybe if you had been a little softer, baby. Men need to feel needed." My coworker, a woman I genuinely liked, looked at me with sad eyes and said, "She's a model, Nadia." I mean, how do you even compete with that? And a family friend, someone who had known me since I was a little girl, shook her head and said, "You know how men are, especially when a younger woman pays them attention." Every single one of those comments was meant to comfort me, and every single one of them felt like a second punch to an already bruised place, Because what they were all really saying, underneath the gentle voices and the sad eyes, was, "This makes sense." Of course he left, what did you expect? And then there was social media, I know I should have stayed off of it, I know that. But grief makes you do irrational things, and for about 3 weeks after Cole left, I was checking his Instagram like it was a second job. I told myself I just needed to understand. I told myself I was looking for answers. What I found was worse than anything I could have imagined. A photo of Cole and Simone at a rooftop dinner. He was laughing, really laughing, the kind of full-body laugh I hadn't seen from him in at least 2 years. He looked lighter, happier, freer. And she was stunning, I'm not going to lie to you and say she wasn't. She was absolutely stunning. And I sat there in my apartment in the dark looking at that photo and I felt something crack open inside of me. But here's where the story turns. Because right in the middle of that crack, right in that raw, ugly, broken open place, a thought came through so clearly it almost scared me. And the thought was this: he is not going to be the reason I disappear. I closed the app. I didn't open it again for 4 months. I want to be honest with you about the rebuild because I think people make it sound cleaner than it is. It wasn't a montage. It wasn't a sudden burst of motivation where I woke up one morning feeling powerful and ready. It was slow, it was messy. It was one tiny decision at a time on days when even tiny decisions felt enormous. Week 1, I made 3 commitments to myself. I was going to go to therapy. I was going to journal every single morning, even if all I wrote was one sentence. And I was going to make one small decision every day that was purely, completely for me, not for anyone else, not to prove anything, just for me. The therapy cracked me open in ways I wasn't ready for. My therapist, a brilliant woman who did not let me get away with anything, she made me look at the parts of myself I had slowly abandoned inside that marriage, not because Cole had taken them, but because I had quietly handed them over, one compromise at a time, until I couldn't quite remember who I was outside of being his wife. And what she helped me find, what I slowly, painfully excavated from underneath 6 years of compromise, was my work. My real work. Before I met Cole, I had been building a small fashion design side business. Nothing huge, just pieces I created myself, a small but loyal following of women who loved what I made. When we got married and life got full and Cole needed a wife who was present, I had quietly let it go. Told myself it was just a hobby, told myself I'd come back to it someday. Someday had finally arrived. Pearl, my best friend, the woman who never once pitied me but also never once let me stay small. Pearl came over one Saturday with fabric swatches and takeout, and she sat on my floor and she said, "Stop mourning a man who didn't know what he had. Build something he can't ignore," so I did. I started slow, sketching in the evenings after work, ordering fabric on weekends, staying up too late because for the first time in years, I was doing something that made losing track of time feel like a gift instead of a problem. The designs started coming back to me like a language I had almost forgotten, and with every piece I finished, something in me came back too. My body started changing, not because I was punishing myself or trying to become someone else, but because I was finally taking care of myself the way I deserved to be taken care of. I started strength training. I started cooking real food again. I started sleeping through the night. 3 months in, I looked in the mirror one morning and I barely recognized the woman looking back at me, and I mean that in the best, most overwhelming way. She looked like someone who had decided to stay. Around month 5, I submitted 3 pieces from my new collection to a local boutique that I had always admired but never thought would look twice at my work. They took all 3. A month later, a second boutique reached out, then a third. A style blogger with a significant following featured one of my pieces in a post, a deep burgundy wrap dress that I had designed during one of my hardest nights. And overnight, my Instagram went from 800 followers to over 40,000. 40,000 women who found my work and saw something in it that spoke to them. I remember sitting on my bathroom floor at 2 in the morning watching the notifications come in, and I was crying, but this time it was completely different tears. This time I was crying because I finally understood what had been waiting for me on the other side of that broken Tuesday night. I moved out of the apartment I had shared with Cole. I found my own place, smaller, but entirely, completely mine. I decorated it the way I had always wanted to decorate a space and never quite felt like I could. Warm golden light everywhere, plants on every surface, my own artwork on the walls, a reading corner with a chair that was so comfortable it was basically a hug. I would come home from a long day and walk through the door and just breathe, really breathe, in a way I hadn't breathed in years. I started going out again. Not to find someone, I wasn't anywhere near ready for that, and honestly, I wasn't even looking. I went out because I wanted to remember what it felt like to be a woman in a room, to laugh loudly, to take up space without apologizing for it. That was when I met Rome, And I'm not going to tell you it was some dramatic love story because at that point it wasn't. He was just a man at a gallery opening who walked up to me like he had all the time in the world and said, "You look like the most interesting person in this room. I had to know if I was right." I laughed, actually laughed. And something that had been clenched tight in my chest for months just loosened. I didn't rush into anything. I sat in my own power and I let things unfold at whatever pace felt right for me. But what Rome gave me in those early months was simple and enormous. He made me remember that being seen felt good, that I was worth seeing. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone else to make me feel like enough. 14 months after the divorce was finalized, a mutual friend sent me a text. Cole and Simone were engaged, and there was a party. And somehow, whether it was an accident or a test, or just the universe having a very specific sense of humor, I was on the guest list. My first instinct was to delete the message and never think about it again. My second instinct was to call Pearl. Pearl's response was immediate and completely unsurprised. "Oh, you're going, and you're wearing something you made yourself?" I spent about 3 days going back and forth in my own head. Part of me said it was beneath me, that showing up to my ex-husband's engagement party was exactly the kind of thing that looked desperate regardless of how good you looked doing it. Another part of me was curious in a way I couldn't quite shake, not about Cole. Not even about Simone, but about myself. About who I was now when I walked into a room that used to belong to a version of me that no longer existed. What finally made me decide to go was something my therapist had said early on in our sessions, that closure isn't something someone else gives you. Closure is something you give yourself when you're ready by choosing to no longer need it from them. I was ready. I designed the outfit myself. I spent 2 weeks on it. A deep emerald structured gown fitted through the body, dramatic at the shoulders, simple enough to let the woman wearing it do all the talking. I made it for myself the way I made everything now. Not to compete, not to perform, just to show up as exactly, completely who I had become. The venue was beautiful, upscale, warm, the kind of place that said money and taste in equal measure. Fairy lights strung across a vaulted ceiling, champagne on silver trays. A crowd of people dressed in their best, laughing the easy laugh of people who belong to a certain kind of world. I arrived alone, calm in a way that surprised even me. I walked through that door and I want to tell you there was some dramatic moment, a record scratch, every head turning at once. But real life isn't a movie. What actually happened was quieter and somehow more powerful than any movie moment could have been. People noticed. One by one, the way you notice a shift in light in a room, a woman near the entrance caught my eye and held it a beat too long. A man in a gray suit stopped mid-sentence. I heard someone say, low and close, "Who is that?" I moved through the room the way I had learned to move through every room in the past 14 months, like I belonged there, like I had built the ground I was standing on, and then I saw Cole. He was standing near the bar with a group of his friends, and Simone was beside him, and she was beautiful. I'm still not going to lie to you about that. But what I noticed more than anything was the exact moment he saw me. The way his smile didn't fall, it just froze. The way his eyes did a slow, involuntary sweep from the top of my head to the floor, the way they always used to when I wore something that stopped him in his tracks. Except this time, it wasn't his approval I was standing there for. I smiled, warm, real, unbothered, and I kept moving. I spent that evening talking to people, laughing, holding my glass of champagne like I had nothing to prove because I didn't. At some point, an older woman I didn't recognize touched my arm and asked me who designed my dress. I told her I did. She stared at me for a moment and then pulled out her phone and asked for my information. She turned out to be a buyer for a regional fashion house, but I didn't know that yet. In that moment, I was just a woman in a dress she made herself, at a party she almost didn't attend, finally standing fully and completely inside her own life. Cole found me toward the end of the evening. Of course he did. He walked over with his hands in his pockets, the way he always did when he was working up the nerve to say something, and he said, "You look incredible, Nadia, you really do." I looked at him for a moment. This man I had loved. This man who had left me at the kitchen table on a Tuesday with an empty closet and a forgotten sock. And I felt, and this is the part I want you to really hear, I felt nothing that hurt. I felt clear, I felt free. I felt like a woman who had walked through fire and come out the other side wearing something she made with her own hands. I said, "Thank you, Cole. Congratulations on your engagement." And I walked away. Here is what I need you to take from this story. Not that she showed up and looked better. Not that he regretted it. Honestly, what he felt that night doesn't matter one bit. What matters is that she walked through a door she almost didn't open and discovered that she had become someone she was proud of. That the leaving, as brutal and unfair and gutting as it was, had somehow cracked open a life that was bigger and brighter and more fully hers than anything she had before. If someone left you for someone younger, someone different, someone they called more exciting, I need you to hear me right now. That is not the end of your story. That is the part just before the best chapter begins. The chapter where you find out exactly who you are when you stop building your life around someone who couldn't see your value. You are not too much. You are not too settled. You are not too anything. You are someone who deserves to take up the whole room. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with a woman who needs to hear it today. Subscribe if you're new here because we tell the real stories on this channel, the ones that start in pain and end in power. Drop a comment below and tell me what's the one thing you walked away from that ended up leading you to something better. I read every single one. I'll see you in the next one.